that today is Armed Forces Day. And I am proud to have served in the military. I'm proud to have served along some very remarkable people like Matthew Allison there in foreign lands. And I'm proud to say that my work, like Matthew's, was about saving lives, not taking them. Very, very important. And you might be thinking, why have I come here to listen to this? Well, you might get some lessons for life from what I'm talking about today. And somewhere along the line, you've all made an assessment whether it was worth it coming to see me speak today. And you might question that assessment after my speech and work out whether it was an effective assessment or not. But nevertheless, we make assessments every day in everything we do. I want to take you back to 1944 to Holland, 1944, World War II. And we were in a vital part of the war effort. The Allies and the British were very keen to retake a critical bridge in a place called Arnhem. And a young intelligence officer, Brian Urquhart, you see this chap here, was tasked with providing intelligence for Operation Market Garden. So he tasked various assets, including aircraft, to fly over the bridge and find out what the Germans were up to. And he discovered that there was a huge amount of German armour and manpower in that area that would almost certainly result in failure for the British operation. And he warned people about it. He told them. And that individual, Brian Urquhart, was told to go off on sick leave. He was told that he was a nervous child suffering from a nightmare. So what happened? In the end, the British airborne drop was initiated. The Germans killed, captured, or wounded over 7,000 men. 7,000 men. Killed, captured, or wounded. They ignored the advice of Brian Urquhart, who went on to become one of the founding fathers of the United Nations, which is often forgotten. The people that were in charge didn't listen, or didn't want to know, or simply had an agenda they wanted to pursue. And I'll leave that with you, but we hear it today in the modern world as well. Fast forward to 2003, and we have plots like this going on in the UK. And this group of people here were keen to put a bomb into Blue Water Shopping Centre. They were keen to target the national grid and destroy it. No doubt would have cost numerous lives. However, a tip-off from the people in a self-storage unit reported to the security services ultimately that a bag of 600 kilograms of ammonium nitrate, homemade explosive precursor, was being stored in a particular lockup in London. So the security services, using very careful assessment, decided to neutralise that explosive, to render it inert. They allowed the operation, or the bad guys, to run, as we call it, in order to be able to wrap up the entire terrorist group and keep people safe. Great use of intelligence assessment. Intelligence assessment is useful, it's vital, because it gives us the who to target, what to target, where to target, when, how and why. And why is that relevant? Well, because there are numerous threats to all of us every day, but there are very limited resources and limited assets. So we have to decide, and I should say, obviously I'm retired now, I was in the military, as you know, I'm retired working in other areas, but I'm very well aware that assets are limited. So we have to decide, how do we prioritise against what threat? Which is the biggest threat to life? Which is the most imminent threat? So intelligence assessment is vital in giving us the right answers. And I'm not sure whether you can see this very well, I apologise for my artwork, but imagine you're on a 13-lane freeway in Los Angeles, and someone says to you, I want you to find a car. Really? Well, what colour is it? You start asking questions. You can't make any informed decisions without some form of assessment. So really, in some ways, in layman's terms, intelligence assessment is about trying to reduce a 13-lane superhighway or freeway in Los Angeles down to a 1-lane country road by applying what we call the intelligence cycle to all the noise, the chatter, the data, the information that's coming through in order to be able to prioritise assets and ensure that we're timely in our approach and targeting the right people and the right things, the most imminent threats. And it's also helping us to look at our percentage of probability. What's the most likely, the most probable possible? It's enabling us to, careful assessment is enabling us to squash that freeway down to a one-lane country road and make some very informed decisions, because without it, we can't make informed decisions. And this is the intelligence cycle. This isn't secret, it's all over the internet if anybody's asking or wondering. But this is, and actually you can use it in everyday life as well, it's a useful tool. But the effectiveness of intelligence assessment can be impacted at any point within this cycle. So for example, if we have a policy maker, somebody in government, or a military commander providing us with direction, if that direction is wrong, then the whole intelligence assessment can be ineffective. So if we've been asked to look at the wrong things, to look for the wrong things by the commander or by the policy maker, then we're into a world of hurt straight away. And then we've got collection. So when we've been tasked by the commander or by the policy maker, we've got to decide what assets we use and how we go about collecting the information, collecting that data, collecting that noise and refining it. And we've got to decide what the best assets are to use, the most cost-effective, most time-effective, all those things. And then we've got to be careful that our collection assets aren't deceived by the adversary. This can be business intelligence, it can be military intelligence, corporate espionage, all those things. And then we've got to process it. This is where the human brain, even with artificial intelligence, the human brain kicks in, which is fallible. The human brain kicks in and we have to process all that information and turn it into intelligence. And sometimes, we're trying to find the answer that supports the policymaker and not the real answer. We're trying to please people, or we're putting our personal bias onto that analysis, which again can render it ineffective. And then finally, dissemination. It is absolutely crucial, critical to preserve secrecy when it comes to intelligence, because it protects our sources, it protects our techniques and our strategies and our behaviours. However, sometimes we don't disseminate intelligence, it doesn't get to the right people in the right time, and people die. So dissemination is a crucial part of this, having the right dissemination channels to the right people, not overcomplicating intelligence, being able to simplify it, and giving it the lowest, what we call protective markings, so the more people can see it, people that can then influence the strategy. And this is something that we've used before. It's a model. You'll see on the right-hand side there that I refer on my left-hand side. And I refer to the most preferable option and the least preferable. For many years, certainly in Iraq, the Americans, for example, they had a lot to learn, and they learned a lot from the British. But they were looking at, rather than shooting the archer, they were shooting at the arrows. And a phrase was coined called left of boom or left of bang, which meant rather than investigating smoking holes in the ground, we put more effort, more assets, and more priority in trying to cut off funding, cut off sources of supply, cut off resources, because they are the things that, once they get interdicted and taken away, will stop bombs being fabricated and then placed in the first place. And the model we use is being able to predict and prevent, first of all, to save lives, predict and prevent. It's a bit of a crystal ball sometimes. You've got to be able to predict and reduce that level of uncertainty. What's the most timely threat? What's the most important threat to deal with? And then we drill down and we look at trying to detect the threat. And we can look at the worst case scenario is then how can we neutralise it? And I did a lot of work in the Middle East looking at weapons intelligence, and that was to enable us to see how devices were being made, how they were fabricated, and then how we can deal with them, how we can neutralise them to save lives. And then, worst case scenario, the bomb goes off, we've got to put in ways of mitigating the effects of that blast. And intelligence assessment has a part to play in informing mitigation measures. What if a device goes off here? What do we need to mitigate against those effects to save lives? And then finally, worst case scenario, exploitation. The bomb's gone off, we get called in to look at biometric forensic evidence, for example, to inform the intelligence cycle again. And this was me in Baghdad, 2004, called to the scene of a car bomb. One that got away, sadly. But we were called in to exploit the scene, to work out some of the atmospherics around that device, to look at some of the techniques that have been used by the bad guys, in order to take information and data off that particular scene to try and re-inform the intelligence cycle and to prevent further loss of life. I want to quickly go through a few other things. Again, 1997, there was a guy called Scott Ritter, former US Marine Corps, was in Iraq. And he was part of the UN weapons inspection team, going around looking for signs of WMD. Didn't find a lot of WMD at the time, but what I did find was evidence of a significant program of improvised explosive device fabrication. And what I would say, the Iraqis, certainly the former regime, were experts in fabricating IEDs. They're experts in concealment and all those things. So they found this stuff, and the weapons inspectors would go away, and even though they weren't looking for this type of thing, looking for IEDs as we call it, they were making notes of what they found. Fast forward, 2004, when I was out in Baghdad, we were getting hit. About 5,000 IED attacks were recorded in 2004. As we all know, there was no WMD, but there was a lot of IED attacks going off. Some influence from foreign players, but a lot of it was certainly homegrown from the former Iraqi regime, who were skilled in IED fabrication and emplacement. But you see, in this particular situation, perhaps the assessment of those notes from 1997 weren't heeded. That we were dealing with people who were very skilled at IED manufacture. And that was lost in the noise, that was lost in the agenda of the day. And then we get 5,000 IED attacks in 2004 and 10,000 in 2005. And then, certainly, when we look at people through a Western lens, we often underestimate them. People like this chap here, a goat herder in Afghanistan, has often been responsible for more compromised special forces operations than anything else. Because these people know the land, they're tuned in, they're wired to the natural environment. And often when we look at these things through a Western lens, we don't always really appreciate how skillful these people can be. And a question for yourselves, how often do you have an agenda, have a thought, a belief, and you're so focused on that belief, that agenda, that thought, that you actually ignore everything on the left and right-hand side of it. You ignore what people are saying on the periphery. You ignore it, it doesn't fit with your belief system, and we get what we call tunnel vision. And that happens sometimes with intelligence analysis, and it again renders it ineffective. We're so driven to support that agenda, to support that question, we don't see what's on the left and right of it. Secrecy. When you were a child, did you ever think about the time when you say, I've got a secret, I'm not telling you? We've all done it, I'm sure. I've got a secret, I'm not telling you, when you were a little child. It gives you power, doesn't it? Feeling of power. So sometimes intelligence isn't disseminated. Reasons, egotistical reasons perhaps, or because knowledge is power. But when it isn't shared, it can lead to loss of life. And it's so important to ensure that balance between getting the intelligence to the people that really need to know it, mixed with preserving secrecy. And then we all see often what we want to see. And we'll also often believe the first thing we see. And some of you may see an elderly couple, some of you may see some musicians. And imagine if you're an intelligence analyst and you believe the first thing that you see. Ineffective analysis. So sometimes what I'll say to you as well, be very careful. How often do you read, do you actively seek out the material that actually contradicts your belief and your views? And it's very rare that we do that. And then what I will say as well, this is interesting, we're almost there guys, but this is interesting because sometimes our assessments will lead us to change tactics and strategies, and that happens in human life as well. But when it comes to dealing with bad people, sometimes it forces them down a pathway we're not prepared for, and that can be dangerous. So we've got to be, for example, car manufacturers make their cars a lot more difficult to break into. So the bad guys quite simply looked at how they could hack and clone the security code from your car keys. It's a cat and mouse game. We've always got to be mindful of how our assessments and how our tactics, when we review them and change things, how it can push the bad guys down a different technological or behavioural pathway we may not be prepared for. This is my first phone I ever used. This Motorola phone. And it was like a brick. And I remember walking down the street, I was in the military, I was carrying this phone. I felt like the coolest bloke in the world, walking down the street with this phone. I was told to put it on charge in my room. Somebody said to me that in 30 years' time, somebody will actually invent a phone without a keypad, and you can do video and everything on it. I'd say, go away. And how often in today's life do we actually do we refute the art of the impossible? Steve Jobs didn't. And this, when we start to scan the horizons in our lives as well as in intelligence assessment, we start to see, hang on, that could be possible. I'm going to look into it and I'm going to examine it in more detail. So horizon scanning is very important. We should never discount what may initially appear to be impossible. Because the bad guys often do impossible things. And as a former IED intelligence officer, I had to be prepared for that and look out for things that may be apparently impossible. And then finally, I'll leave you with this. When we see other cultures through a Western lens, a Western viewpoint, we often miss a lot of information. Because people in different cultures have all these different things, different stories, different language, different values. And I'm aware that the security services, for example, and the ranks of those who are serving to keep us safe is being swelled, thankfully, by more people from different backgrounds, different cultures. And the more diversity we have within the ranks of those that keep us safe, the more effective our assessments will be. Because we need people from all walks of life to interpret information, people with different values, different belief systems, and that'll keep us safe. Thanks a lot. Thank you.